Good evening, and welcome to your daily news briefing. It's Thursday, June 4th, 2026. I'm glad you're here. We've got a full show for you tonight, from a genuinely exciting breakthrough in cancer research, to drama on the Senate floor, to the New York Knicks sending an entire city into a frenzy. Let's get into it. We're going to start with what might be the most hopeful story we've had on this program in a while, and that is new research on lung cancer. Now, lung cancer kills more people every year than any other cancer. More than breast cancer, more than prostate cancer, more than colon cancer, it is, by that measure, the deadliest cancer we face. And for a long time, the challenge has been that by the time most people are diagnosed, the disease is already well advanced. That's what makes today's announcements so significant. A team of more than 80 researchers, working across 4 continents, has identified a set of proteins in the blood that can accurately predict lung cancers more than 5 years before a person would ever receive a diagnosis. 5 years. Think about what that window means. If you know 5 years ahead of time that a cancer is likely to develop, you have an enormous amount of time to intervene, to monitor, to act. But the researchers didn't stop there. They also found early evidence that an existing drug, something already on the market, could actually reduce the odds of a tumor developing in the first place. That's the part that really grabs scientists' attention, because it suggests that prevention, not just early detection, might genuinely be within reach. Now, how does lung cancer actually start? The researchers explained that factors like smoking and air pollution cause 2 things: mutations, which are changes to the DNA in your cells, and inflammation, which is your body's response to damage or irritation. Together, those 2 things can lead to cancer. What's exciting about this is that inflammation is something scientists can potentially target. It's a biological process, and biological processes can be interrupted. Mutations are much harder to reverse once they've happened, but if you can catch and address the inflammation before a tumor forms, you might be able to stop the cancer before it ever starts. Outside experts are calling this a promising starting point toward what they describe as a, quote, holy grail of public health research. That phrase, holy grail, gets thrown around a lot. But in this context, it's apartment. The ability to predict and prevent cancer rather than simply fight it after the fact would be one of the most consequential advances in modern medicine. The research is still in its early stages, so we're not talking about something that will be in a doctor's office next year. But the foundation is being laid, and that matters enormously. Alright, let's shift from the science lab to the Senate floor, because there was quite a bit of drama on Capitol Hill today, and it all centered on a fund that President Trump wants to create. Here's the background. The president is seeking to establish a $1.8 billion fund, that's billion with a B, to pay people he believes have been politically persecuted. It's an unusual proposal, and it has drawn significant opposition, including from within the president's own party. Democrats tried today to permanently block the fund from being created. That push failed. Senate Republicans defeated the Democratic effort, but the vote itself was revealing. 3 Republican senators broke ranks and voted with the Democrats: Susan Collins of Maine, John Husted of Ohio, and Dan Sullivan of Alaska. All 3 of those senators are up for re-election this year. Draw from that what you will. Their opposition to the fund didn't succeed in killing it, but it does signal that this is not a unified Republican caucus on this particular issue. Now, here's where the politics get layered. Several Republicans oppose the fund on principle. But voting to block it through the Democratic procedural measure would have created a different problem. It could have stalled the Republicans' broader effort to fund the president's immigration crackdown, which is a much higher legislative priority for the party right now. So you had senators essentially caught between opposing something they don't like and protecting something they do. That's a tough spot, and it explains why only 3 Republicans were willing to break ranks. The Senate is expected to keep voting over the next several hours. It's one of those marathon voting sessions that senators seem to specialize in. So there may be more news out of the Capitol before the night is over. And speaking of the Trump administration, there are several other developments worth flagging. The president announced $700 million in new federal funding aimed at reinvigorating the domestic coal industry. That's a significant commitment to a sector that has been in long decline, and it signals a clear policy direction from the administration. John Bolton, the former national security advisor who served under Trump during his first term, has reached a deal to plead guilty to mishandling classified information that was used in his memoir. Bolton and Trump had a famously acrimonious falling out, and Bolton later wrote critically about the president. The guilty plea relates to classified material that appeared in that book. Also from the Pentagon, a man who participated in the January 6 riot at the Capitol has been hired to work for a sensitive branch of the Defense Department. That's a story that's likely to generate significant scrutiny and follow-up reporting in the coming days. And on a somewhat lighter note, the president announced plans for a new construction project, a promenade at the Lincoln Memorial. He said, quote, "They want to call it the Trump Promenade, but I don't know if I want to do that. Make of that what you will." Let's move on now to a story out of Maine's Senate race. Graham Plattner is the presumptive Democratic candidate for Senate in that state, and the New York Times has been reporting on his personal history. In extensive interviews, 3 women who were romantically involved with Plattner offered what reporters described as complicated assessments of their relationships with him. They described those relationships as volatile, unsettling, and at times emotionally wrenching. They said he could be charming, but also demeaning, and in at least one case, physically threatening. They recalled that he drank heavily and was regularly unfaithful. Now, other women who dated Plattner told the Times that he was caring and kind, so there's clearly a complicated picture here. In response to the story, Plattner released a statement in which he acknowledged that he had, in his words, too often self-medicated with alcohol, and was a far from perfect boyfriend. He added, "Any characterization beyond that is false, and I believe, politically motivated." This is worth watching because Maine is shaping up to be a competitive Senate race, and Susan Collins, who, as I mentioned, just split with her party over the Trump Fund, is one of the most closely watched incumbent senators in the country. Whoever the Democrats nominate will face significant scrutiny. Now, from the United States to Central Africa, specifically to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where there is an active Ebola outbreak, and where the situation on the ground is deeply troubling. The outbreak appears to have originated in a remote mining town called Mungwalu. And while health workers have been deployed to try to stop the spread of the virus, they are running into a profound obstacle: mistrust. Residents in the region are angry and afraid. Many do not trust the health workers who are there trying to help. Some are in denial that the disease is even real. This is, unfortunately, not a new challenge in outbreak response. Distrust of outside health authorities has complicated the response to previous Ebola outbreaks in the region as well. But it makes an already devastating situation significantly harder to contain. The New York Times has journalists on the ground in the region, and they've produced video from the center of the outbreak. It's worth watching if you want to understand what the situation actually looks like. Let's run through some of the other top news of the day before we get to a few lighter stories to close out the evening. In agriculture, for the first time since the 1960s, the New World screwworm, a flesh-eating pest, has been found in the United States. It turned up in a calf in Texas. The screwworm was eradicated from the U.S. decades ago through a concerted effort, and its reappearance will likely prompt significant concern among livestock producers and agricultural officials. In the Middle East, a ceasefire brokered by the United States between Israel and Lebanon appeared to have had limited, if any, effect today. Israel and Hezbollah traded strikes, signaling that the fragile truce remains under significant strain. On education, internal documents have surfaced showing how major social media companies worked to hook teenagers at school, targeting them specifically in an educational setting. That's a story about the intersection of tech, adolescent mental health, and institutional responsibility that is likely to fuel ongoing legislative and regulatory debates. At the Supreme Court, AT&T and Verizon argued that they were deprived of their constitutional right to a jury trial when the Federal Communications Commission penalized them. The justices disagreed, ruling against the telecom giants. That's a significant ruling for the regulatory landscape governing how the FCC can enforce penalties. On the oceans, back in 2022, a ship called the Hidden Gem lowered a bus-sized collector vehicle into one of the least studied places on Earth, the deep seabed, to search for metals. The expedition has raised serious environmental concerns about the potential impact of deep-sea mining. This story has continued to develop over the intervening years, and it touches on some of the biggest questions we face about resource extraction and environmental protection in places that are difficult to monitor and regulate. In science, new research suggests that bright city lights may actually make allergies worse for people who live in urban areas. The mechanism involves disrupted circadian rhythms and how the body's immune responses are regulated. If you've noticed your allergies seem worse in the city than in the country, there might be more to that than just pollen counts. And finally, a sad note from the world of literature and art. Marjane Satrapi, the Iranian-French author of the graphic novel series Persepolis, has died at the age of 56. Persepolis, which tells the story of her childhood in Iran during and after the Islamic Revolution, became one of the most celebrated works in graphic literature, and was adapted into an acclaimed animated film. Satrapi was a singular voice, and her work gave millions of readers around the world a window into an experience and a history that they might never otherwise have encountered. She was 56 years old. Now, because we can't end on a string of heavy news stories, let's talk about the New York Knicks. If you haven't been following along, the Knicks are in the NBA Finals, and last night they won Game 1. And if you know anything about New York City's relationship with its basketball team, you understand that this is not a small thing. The Knicks have not been in the NBA Finals in decades. This is a city that has been waiting a very long time. My colleague Jessica Testa is in New York and sent back a dispatch from the scene. She said the first thing her phone served her this morning was a video of Mayor Zoran Mamdani hanging out of an SUV, greeting an ecstatic crowd of fans. She described him as looking like, quote, dopamine personified. Flat-screen TVs appeared along sidewalks in Brooklyn. Outside Madison Square Garden, people were climbing on top of anything they could find. One photographer posted a video of a woman whose clothes and hair caught fire in the chaos, which tells you something about the intensity of the celebration. Game 1 was a gritty win, and the Knicks play their first home game on Monday. Both President Trump and Mayor Mamdani plan to attend, which means you'll have the president and the mayor of New York City in the same arena at an extremely emotionally charged sporting event. That should be interesting. We'll have more to say about that as the series develops. Before we go, a couple of quick things from the arts and culture world. On Broadway, the new production of Death of a Salesman, starring Nathan Lane, Laurie Metcalf, and directed by Joe Mantello, is up for 9 Tony Awards this weekend. The three of them have worked together for many years, and their chemistry is reportedly one of the standout qualities of the production. Our theater critic expects it to win for Best Revival. The Tony Awards are this weekend, so we'll find out soon. And in music, a Belgian pop star named Pumlian Tages sells out arenas in the northern, Dutch-speaking part of Belgium and had a song at the top of the Belgian pop chart for 22 weeks last year. But in the southern, French-speaking region of Wallonia, many people have never heard of her. Belgium has a deep cultural divide between its two main linguistic communities, and it apparently extends to pop music. Tages has been taking Duolingo lessons in French in an effort to broaden her audience. It's a charming detail, and a reminder that even within a small country, culture can be profoundly regional. And finally, because it's too good not to mention, our last story tonight is about the author Ann Patchett. Patchett is a best-selling novelist, and she typed nearly her entire new novel, Whistler, while walking on a treadmill set up under a standing desk. She said that simply lying on a couch, her preferred method, was leading to aches and pains. So she started walking while she wrote. And something unexpected happened. It didn't just make her feel better physically, it opened up new creative windows. She said, quote, the sensation was that I walked into my novel every day. There's a lovely poetry to that. And as a side benefit, her dog, Nemo, likes to lounge on the treadmill when she's not using it. That is going to do it for tonight's briefing. We covered a lot of ground, from a potential breakthrough in cancer prevention, to Senate floor drama, to Ebola in the Congo, to the New York Knicks setting an entire city on fire, figuratively and, in at least one case, literally. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back tomorrow with more. Until then, have an active evening.